On this week's episode, we talk about money. Welcome to the Ask a Matchmaker podcast. I'm your host, Matchmaker Maria, and I am so excited for this week's guest because sometimes you ask me money questions and I might have some answers in the lifestyle, financial world, but I don't have all the answers, which is why this week our expert is a financial expert. Our co-host is a financial expert, and that's Ashley Feinstein, also known online as the Fiscal Femme. Welcome to the Ask a Matchmaker pod.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and for that great intro.
I always get questions about financial stuff, and it's always like prenup related. Now, you've got two last names. I have two last names. You're married?
Yes.
Power move. I think it's such a power move when there's two last names. Was that a conversation with you and your husband?
Yes, it was definitely a long conversation.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why?
Because it was really important to me to have my last name involved, and it was really important to him to have his last name as my last name. And so I ended up trading. So I kept my first last name, Feinstein, and then I also got the dog to sleep in the bed, and I got to name the two kids' first names. So it was like a negotiation.
What culture do you both belong to?
We're Jewish.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Wow. And wait, when your name, it's first name and then two last names, or is it first name, middle name, last name?
It's a second middle name now, technically.
Okay.
And
you have two first names?
No, I'm Ashley Rachel Feinstein Gersley.
Wow.
Yeah. I tried to get him to make Feinstein his second middle name.
He didn't want to do that?
It was just a lot of paperwork. I don't know.
But you were okay with the paperwork.
Exactly. This is where we had our negotiation started. Maybe he'll do it one day. Maybe our 10-year anniversary.
Do you have kids?
He'll surprise me. Yes, 2 kids.
You have 2 kids? Did you name them? Did he
Yes.
hold up that end of the bargain?
He did.
All right. All right. And do they have 2 first names?
No.
Do they have both of your last names?
No.
So they have his last name.
Yes.
But you chose the first name.
Exactly.
It's a win.
That was
a
win. Yeah.
It's a win.
That's what.
For me, I knew I was going to keep my last name because I was already going by that professionally. And even like on my Instagram, it says Maria Avgitidis Periotakis. Mainly because of my own curiosity. I want to see if it would fit all those letters. It's a lot. And then on my Gmail, on my Google, my work email, it says Maria Avgitidis P. But I have a book deal, and St. Martin's was like, no, we're going to just keep Avgitidis. That's just way too long for your cover. Thanks. But in Greece, in my culture, if a woman keeps her name and his name, it's kind of like seen like a power move, like, oh, you're a boss bitch. So you'll see like some of the most famous women in Greece, they tend to have like her maiden name and his last name as like, oh, because in Greece, nobody changes their last names. Let me take a step back. Greek women in Greece, since like 1990, don't change your last names.
Got it.
Your kid will take your husband's name, but there are no last name exchanges.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And then the only women who tend to do that are women who are like, I'm entrepreneurial. Boom. Like, or something. Like, I perceive myself as a boss ass bitch. 2 last names.
2 last names.
Because also we don't name our kids. That's the other thing. Our children's names are decided when, like we name our kids in a certain order based on our grandparents. So like your first, typically your first son is the father's father. Your first daughter is the mother's mother. The second son is the mother's father. Second daughter is the father's mother. So there's not a lot of negotiation there.
Right. I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. But yeah, so other negotiations, when you got married to your spouse, did you do a prenup?
We didn't initially.
Oh, you have like something after?
So there's prenup and postnup. But so what I would say is I think generally with relationships and marriages, and I talk about this a lot, is that you want to protect yourself.
Right. And
that is in having a prenup or a postnup, in having your own funds in case something happens, that you're okay to walk away. And so definitely those are conversations and met with attorneys. And so it depends on how your assets are, if you need one or not, or if you would be in a better situation if you didn't have one, or
what if you have no assets?
Let's say if you go into the marriage and it's kind of equal, or you're in a place where it feels like it wouldn't be a big deal, maybe that's something you revisit, or you didn't know when you got married, and so you want to talk to an attorney.
Are you talking about like post-nuptial
That's the
agreements?
post-nup, and then you can reevaluate. But I think, I hear a lot like, this is so unromantic, like talking about this when you're getting married, and thinking about already what would happen if you got a divorce. But I interviewed like divorce attorneys, a divorce attorney for my latest book, and she was saying it's actually really romantic, because what you're saying is this is all sorted out so that when things get rocky, which inevitably they will, that you
For
can,
some marriages, yeah.
that you will focus on the marriage, and you're not worried. There's not this undercurrent like, will I be okay financially? What's the plan financially? So I thought that was an interesting take on it, and a way to say, look, this is so we can focus on us if something were to happen.
I love that. You decided then to get a post-nuptial agreement with your husband. What was the first domino here that you were like, oh, we should do this now?
So we didn't do it. That was something we looked into, and then we're like, we don't need that still. But it's just something that you want to know what would happen in case, and to know that you're set. I would say that's like the...
Doesn't it vary from like state to state?
Yes. That's why it's important to talk to somebody. And there's varying degrees of, like, you can do something where it's a super simple thing online. There are companies that do that. You could have your own representation, depending on, there's different roads that you can go down. But a lot of times just like a little bit of a conversation, and having someone with the degree who knows can look at your information and tell you.
Do people ever come to you for that kind of advice? Like, hey, I'm getting married. I own a house. What do I do here? How do I get him involved in my finances? Did you ever get those questions?
So definitely, if it's around like a prenuptial or anything legal, I always refer, because I'm not an attorney. But as far as like combining finances, or how to have those conversations, or navigating tricky money things, definitely.
So let's talk about those three things, because those are three separate things.
Yeah, there's so many things with love and
those
money.
are my favorite things, because I would love to hear your take on it, but I'm actually I find that, and these are just from like studies that I've read, but I think it's like a pro if you're combining finances to a certain degree.
Sorry, it was taking me a minute to follow.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. If you're, yes.
So for instance, like I've seen couples who, let me put a little more context. Not everyone can be trusted with money. So let's start with that. So we both agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not everyone can be trusted with money. Some people don't know how to use money. Some people were never taught to learn how to use money. I feel like I'm one of those people, but then, made some mistakes, learned how to use, got knowledge, right? But then I see that if you can have a conversation about money, and you can figure out how do you spend money while you're dating, like understanding someone's lifestyle, and how they value their time, and how they value their money. Because, I've seen people who are very wealthy who don't have the same spending habits as me in the opposite way, right?
Right.
So like that number doesn't necessarily mean what you might think it means.
Yeah, for sure.
So I can see a place where it's like, oh yeah, I'm pro share checking account, like maybe 2 separate credit cards where you're paying into those credit cards, so you have some privacy, but also like pro checking out, pro understanding your family budget. Because if you, in my mind, and I've seen this in studies too, where it's like, if you can have that trust with someone, if you can talk about your family budget and you both have equal access, then you know how to have hard conversations.
Yeah. So I would say there's like 1,000,001 ways to set up those systems, like credit cards, accounts, what each one is doing. And I'd say usually the more communication, the better. For couples, I often recommend having like a threshold for spending. So and you decide together, but let's say anything over $100, if it's not our regular spending, like at least talk about it. It doesn't mean you're getting permission, but just like, you don't want a Peloton to show up at the door and then the other person's like, what is happening? Yeah,
here?
Exactly.
It's like whenever you see those, I know SNL did a bit, but I've been saying it for years, when like they have these commercials online. Commercials are like, get your wife a Lexus. And it's like,
so stressful to me.
Why would you ever buy someone a car without talking to them first?
I know.
That's crazy.
I know. It's honestly, it's a little bit sad, but I kind of feel sometimes the same about like expensive jewelry. Like it's coming from my money too. Like I really want to, it's not ever, I don't know. So, but definitely the car commercials stress me out. Where
so what do you think, do you have a threshold in your family?
we talk about a lot. Also, we have money parties, and this is another thing that I think those in long-term relationships should have. Essentially, one time a month. You could have it more frequently, but what did our spending look like? What's coming up in the next month? Are there any financial to-dos
What makes
that we
this a
need to
party?
tackle? So the language is important to
Are
me.
you guys wearing like lao or something? Like what?
So I try to have everyone brainstorm things that will make it fun. I have a money party playlist that are like just songs that pump me up about money. We're usually in our PJs, like sipping tea
When you
or
say
something.
everyone, who is involved in this conversation?
In the money party conversation?
Yeah.
Where did I say everyone?
Yeah.
Oh, like I think everyone who does a money party
Oh, okay.
should think
I'm
about
thinking
what
you
would
and
make
your
it
husband.
fun.
I'm like, is
No.
there more people invited to this? Like, wow.
Well, I used to host live money parties because I think there's something about just having to show up and do it. And if there's people doing it around you, or even if you're just texting your friend, like, let's do our money party right now, it has us that we're more likely to do it.
Right.
And I think that's a really great way to compartmentalize money conversations in a relationship, because instead of saying like, why was the Amex so high? Like as they're walking out the door, it's like, no, we'll talk about that at the money party. Or if you're stressed about this,
it's like an event.
It's an event,
I
and you
love
can make it like some people. I remember in a workshop, a guy shared he loves ice cream, so he's just gonna have ice cream at his money parties to start trying to connect that time with something positive. So anything you want to try out to make it fun, like you can drink wine too, but I would just err on the side of more of the wine towards the end. Otherwise, you'll get off track.
My husband and I, we talk about money usually around like the 5th of the month, because I think that's when we pay off our personal credit cards. And I will say, and I've said this to a few of my clients, like the first time that you sit down with your credit card bill, not together, I mean like your separate card bills, before, as you're deciding to start combining your finances, I'm like, that, for me at least, that was not a 1 hour conversation. That took 3 weeks of trying to find the courage, trying to show him like, yeah, I decided to go to Starbucks 5 times in one day. Don't judge me, like don't judge me. Here it is.
Yes.
Right. And it's all because you're just trying to figure out like, okay, if we live together, what does it look like to live together just on this financial ledger?
Right.
Right. And like, how many times am I really going to go to Starbucks 5 times in one day? You know what I mean? Like, so you start to have that conversation. It just took a lot longer. For us, I think it took like 3 weeks. So we would stop. We would like, okay, tap out.
Right. I need a break.
We need a break. Let's go revisit this. And we would say like, let's revisit this again next week, next Thursday, whatever it was. And I remember we would do it on a train. So we were sitting next to each other instead of like face to face. That just made me feel more comfortable.
Right. And there's like the physical contact, like closeness kind of, but.
Well, I can't leave. I can't storm out of the train.
True.
And then it was all just to make this conversation of like, okay, if we live together, if we combine our finances, this is our XYZ budget for the month, right? Mm-hmm. And then we do have a threshold too. I think ours is 150, which it's a text message.
Yeah.
Like, hey, my husband's like, I bid on this comic book. It's $200 and it's like $200. I'm like, hope you win. And I'm like, I'm getting Botox this month, just so you know. Like,
yes.
And, I think we don't really look at the credit card bill anymore. We don't look at like, but at the end of the month, we'll say like, okay, this is how much we spent. And then because George is in charge of that part, he'll say stuff like, we went $200 above. So maybe this month, let's just be a little bit more mindful, And then sometimes I'll do like an Amazon challenge. I go, do not buy a thing from Amazon, like in January. Mm-hmm. Everyone else is doing dry 30. I'm like, dry Amazon.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need anything from Amazon this month. So I'll put stuff in the cart, but I'm waiting until February 1st.
That's actually a really therapeutic way to do it, is the cart. I'd say ours, I think I brought up the money party because I'm like scanning our stuff all the time. So like nothing gets past me. But I think $100 is where we talk. But even a lot of times we'll even flag other things just to talk it through. Like, is this a dumb idea, or do you agree with this? But I do think something that came up for us in combining is that we value different things as far as spending. Like life values, we're aligned. But I am an experience person and he is a things person. And so there's like you mentioned, the coffee, there can be a devaluing of what the other person is spending their money on. Like, oh, why do we have already so much stuff? Do we really need another gadget, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, I can't believe you'd spend that much on a workshop. So I do find one great way of navigating that, because I notice too in relationships, there's often a saver and there's a spender,
Totally.
and then we polarize
Absolutely.
each other.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
the saver's like more saving, and the spender's like, I need to be free, and it gets worse. Is to have an amount that you can spend judgment free. That's like not part of the joint expenses. It's like, as long as you stay within this number, 500, whatever it is, it can be a good way to take that judgment out. And it's like, if I buy 80 matcha shots, it doesn't matter. It's like, as long as I'm in that, I don't
Not
even
in
drink
one day, but
Right.
yeah.
As long as
Well,
you
you
don't
know what's
die.
funny though is like, as you're saying this, all I'm thinking about how it's like, it feels like it's hard to do, but the more you do it, then you have like the social muscle and like the skills to keep having this conversation easily.
Yeah.
Like for instance, I want to go see this lecture, and I told my husband, like, if I'm going to go see a lecture, I don't care where I sit, but for this specific lecture, I said to him, I kind of want to be in the front row. I feel like I need, for my own whatever, I want to know that the person speaking saw my face. I've convinced myself that I'm going to become friends with them. So I really want to go to this. And it's like $300 for the front row. And he was like, okay. And I was like, oh, really? He's like, Maria, you've never talked about, like, you don't even go to concerts, like, so if this is something that you want to go to. And I was like, okay, should I go alone or do you want to come with me? And he's like, do you want me to come with you? And I'm like, I really do. I think you'd learn a lot from this person. So maybe you should come with me. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, you still want to be in the front row? And he's like, this is important to you? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, okay, then it's important to you. Then we're going to go. And then now, for next month, maybe eat in more.
Right.
Maybe we're not doing, we're not, stuff like that. Do you ever think about like your grocery bill? Because I feel like things have been getting a little higher.
Yeah.
And I'm always like thinking about that. And then I'm also thinking about kids' birthday parties. Like, kids' birthday parties are expensive.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like attending, I mean hosting them.
No, I know. Yeah.
How old are your children?
3 and 6.
3 and 6.
Oh my gosh.
So you get it.
I get
Is
it.
your 6-year-old in kindergarten or first grade?
First grade.
Mine's in kindergarten. Missed the
Okay.
cutoff. 16 days.
Oh.
That was it. Just cut off. It's
My
okay. He's
3
like
is like that.
He's a boy.
Yeah.
Is yours a boy, the first one?
Both are.
Both are boys?
Yeah.
Oh, I got a boy and a girl. I'm better than you. I'm just kidding. I just know that some people think that though.
That's so
Please
funny.
do not put that in. Actually, I don't care. Anyway, so
better
all
than
right.
us.
So you have a 3 and a 6-year-old. So you understand what I'm saying then?
Yeah.
So like, I think what's like shocking to me now, and we mentioned this right before we start recording, is like activities are expensive too.
Yes. All of the things that I didn't, I do this for my job. I help plan people's budgets. Like I started out by just literally digging in with people on their budgets. And I just didn't account for like camp, that there's this months of the year that there's nothing.
Right.
I didn't account for all the
And
activities.
you're Jewish. I mean, that's like a cultural thing. Your kids go to camp.
Yeah, eventually they're not yet at sleepaway, but eventually
Oh.
that's a huge
And
expense.
I heard how much it costs, and I was like,
I know.
wow. Like, I mean, I went to camp in Greece, but even then, I'm like, still, like that, it's expensive.
Right.
Like even now, they were doing summer camp at my kid's school, and I was like, how much is it per week? What? This is not sleepaway. I have to pick them up at 1 p.m. and this is how much it costs?
Right.
That's nuts.
I know.
Do your kids do any extracurricular activities yet?
They do.
What do
They do soccer and basketball.
How much is soccer?
$45 a class.
For a 6-year-old?
Yeah, and a 3-year-old. Well, actually, basketball's $40. I don't know why. It's the same
Per
company.
class.
Per class. Yeah. I know.
Is it class once a week?
Yes.
Do you know? That's like the craziest thing I've ever heard.
I know.
I can't believe ice skating is less than basketball.
Yours do ice skating lessons?
My son does ice skating lessons.
Oh, that's so cool.
And it's like $20 a class.
That's amazing.
It's like an hour. It's like 30 minutes is the practice and 30 minutes is a free skate.
Does
So
he have
an
his own
hour.
skates? Because that's the other
does.
thing. Okay.
But now
that's-
he outgrew them after like growth spurt.
Right, because the rentals of these
So
things.
now we rent them. But we rent them, it's only $4.
Oh, where do you live?
Jersey. Where do you live?
In Jersey. Jersey City.
That's where they get you. No, it's right. We go to the Bridgewater Ice Skating Center. That's like
Amazing.
the popular one, and it's like pretty affordable. I can't believe soccer costs that much. Like soccer to me is like a ball in a field.
I know. There's like the group, so I think it's like 3 kids, so it's closer to, it's small, but yeah, it's so expensive. And then you add it up. Like,
so that's the thing. I talked to my husband about that stuff. It's like my son is now asking for like certain classes, and we have to think about like time, and we have to think about the money.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, do we actually have time to do this? Because maybe it's the same time, because my son also does ballet. My kids do ballet and they do ice skating.
Amazing.
And like, on Saturday mornings is ballet. So we can't my son wants to do chess club. And I'm like, we can't do it this season, but maybe next season. Well, now that we know chess club's only on Saturdays, we can do ballet on like a Monday.
Yeah.
So it's like trying to manage this part,
I think the most powerful word in budgeting is yet. Like he's like, chess club, you're like, not yet. Like next season.
Next season.
Yeah. And a lot of times, like, well, with that, I'm sure he'll want to do it. And that's great that he'll want to do chess. But in a lot of times when we say yet and we just put it off, like adding things to a cart, then we're like, oh, I don't actually want it so much.
Yeah, I have to learn to like not book things right away, because my son last summer was like, I want to do soccer. And I was like, great. And no, within like 2 weeks, he comes out, he's like, I don't want to do soccer. And I was like, oh, all right. I was able to get a refund, thank God, but because it's expensive.
No, yes.
So what do you think? So we talked about, having that conversation, and, obviously you said that, you would revert people to like a different thing, but you're saying that you help people budget. So how do you do that?
Help people budget?
Yeah.
So one other thing that I was thinking of as you were sharing about like the checking in and the front row is I have in our money conversations, like especially when you're first having the money talk with someone, it doesn't have to be like, here is how much I have in debt. It doesn't have to be like showing our numbers, but I do think some key questions can help us really understand where our partner's coming from. So asking like, what's your first money memory? It can be really eye-opening.
That's a great question.
What your family was like growing up with money, and then your biggest fear. Because sometimes I've found when I work with couples that the biggest fear, a couple could have like great jobs, savings, but one of them has this fear of losing it all, of like not having a home. And no matter how okay they are financially, like that is an undercurrent, and that is going to affect the stress. Yeah. And when they're stressed about overspending, that's what they're worried about. And so to understand that your partner has a fear like that can be really helpful to have compassion or in those conversations. But for the budgeting, like as tedious as it can be, I find it's no matter how much we earn, it's so easy for our expenses to fill it up. Like with $45 soccer classes or whatever it is.
$600 birthday parties.
Yes.
Like, I don't think people realize. I'm like, how much am I paying? Like, and you're like, what are you going to do? Not do it?
Right.
So you're kind of stuck there like, all right, I guess I'm going to have a birthday party at like a regular center. I'm not even taking them. Yeah. It's like 12 kids.
Right.
It's 12 kids. And then, what blows my mind is like, does this happen to you where like your children's classmates invite them? And I'm like, I don't have that kind of, like, I'm not inviting your classmates to this. You have a birthday party at school. And then your birthday party is going to be the friends that you have outside of school.
Right. Yeah. No, and then it's so expensive. So expensive.
Do you, as you were speaking and you were saying those questions, I think they're brilliant questions. I'm going to definitely add them onto my little dating toolkit. One of the questions that I've tell my clients to also ask is like, when your parent gets sick, what happens? Because that's like a big part, I think, of financial understanding too. Like, I don't know what relationship people have with their parents. Everyone's different, right? But we do have a crisis in this country, an elder care crisis, and it's affecting our housing inventory, but it's also affecting people at home. There's not a lot of help for people. I'm probably going to do a lot more episodes on this topic in the future, but I feel like, if your mom gets sick, is she moving in with us? Are we taking care of them?
Right.
Because, for instance, when my mom got sick, I was like, I needed help. And I was trying to find a nurse, and I found out that nurses cost like $250 a month, $250 an hour. Or was it a day? It doesn't matter. I think it was a day. It was $250 a day. And I was like, I don't have that money.
Right.
And then I was like, how much is dialysis transportation? $140 for 3 times a week. So that adds up now, 600, right?
Yes.
And then I was like, all right, forget it. Like I'll do it myself. And then you find out, it's like, and then how much is this? And then how much is this? And you're just like, wow, what if I didn't have the flexibility? What if I was commuting into the city every day?
Right.
Like what if, there's just all these questions like, I guess, and you know what it is? The answer is that someone's going to give up their job to take care of their parent.
And I think too, it brings up conversations to have with parents that are challenging around money. Like, what do you have going on? Like, do you have your healthcare proxy? Do you have your,
I don't think a lot of people are prepared for retirement, and they have not prepared for end of life.
Yes. Like, what are your wishes? And those are tricky conversations. Sometimes they don't want to talk about it, or they don't know. But that makes it, even if you're saying, I am the person that will take care of them, you really don't know I
didn't know anything about my parents' financial history until I would say like 2 years ago. I was like their healthcare proxy and I had no idea. I was like, what? So then you're like, all right, I guess this is gonna fall on me now. Like, and that's a conversation you have to have with your spouse too. Like, this is gonna affect both of us.
Right.
And then it makes you kind of like turns into a snowball, because then I'm like, okay, what about your parents when they get sick? They have your sister, okay, and then like you kind of have to go around the siblings too, like, hey, who's picking it up here? Who's doing this?
Right, and even if they
that's a finance party right there.
That's a very big party.
Yeah.
Right, and you're saving for all these goals, right? Like it might be a wedding, kids, camp, whatever you got going on, college, right. And then parents.
And then you have your parents, and then I feel like for me, I'm just kind of watching this like crescendo happen, like from all like, because I'm experiencing it, right? I'm experiencing elder care expenses, but I also have student loans. I also have young children.
Right.
I'm a business owner. Like there's like a lot of plates to juggle.
Yes.
So I think what you do is really important, because I think you're giving people the vocabulary to have those conversations.
Thank you.
How do you feel about answering some questions from our listeners?
I would love it.
Welcome to the Ask a Matchmaker hotline. How can we help you?
Hi. So I just have questions about when you're first starting dating, when is the appropriate time and how to bring up money conversations? Because financial responsibility is really important to me. And I just recently had a relationship end, and I just don't know if I approached it right, but also I don't know where to draw the line between like giving somebody a chance to prove that they're also financially responsible, and when to draw the line is it's just our goals don't line up. And is that a deal breaker?
Ashley?
Such a great question. I feel like there are, and I'm sure you have thoughts on this too, but I feel like there are little hints when dating into how someone manages their money. So you might know a lot more than you think even before you sit down and have a talk about it. And there can be tidbits that sneak in. If someone, mentions that, something's not in the budget, like, oh, they have a budget, or they mention a goal, or they mention investing, that you notice if they're tipping generously, those type of things. You can get little hints about how someone is with money through spending time with them, just because money is something that we're dealing with all day, every day. I do think that everyone's going to have their line of what is a deal breaker as far as money and what is something that they can work with. And I would say that we mentioned earlier that this is not something that we learn about or talk about a lot of times. So a lot of us are improving and growing. And so there can be, for example, I remember an interview about credit scores and relationships and how there's a correlation. If you have a higher credit score, that you're going to have a higher likelihood of staying in a committed relationship and being loyal in a relationship. And while that I can see how that makes sense, like a credit score is something that takes 7 years to repair. So you might be making all these financial changes and improving, and it's still not getting reflected in your score. So I would say to keep that in mind too. And I think you mentioned in your question, like there is that kind of that grace that we're all figuring this out, and that we're not going to be perfect, but also that you want to see that effort that someone is interested in that area of their life and improving it and making moves.
And it's also like what you said, like those signs are a little bit early in the beginning of like when you're having conversations that are not necessarily money related, but how money orbits around like a circumstance. So for instance, you know, I like to like right in the last few weeks, we've been hearing a lot about Taylor and Travis. And you'll hear people say stuff like, well, I don't care about what a billionaire thinks. And it's like, okay, right there, there's something being said. Or they'll say something like, when they talk about, for instance, President Trump, well, he didn't get paid. And it's like, okay, well, do you value your public servant not getting paid? Like, did he get paid other ways? Like what's the correlation between the two?
Right.
Like, why shouldn't someone who's doing a job get paid?
Right.
Or maybe they'll say stuff like even like when you watch like a movie, like for instance, I just watched The Bear, the show The Bear. Have you watched The Bear?
I haven't seen it, no.
It's really good. You would love it. Okay. And it's like money is part of the, like you can see it's like the low hum frequency, but you're also seeing people who just really passionate about cooking and about servicing people through food. Right. And I think some people might watch and say, I would never do this if I wasn't making $1 million a year. And there's other people saying like, man, this is really motivating me, inspiring me to do a hobby of mine in a very passionate way. And it's like, how much is money that frequency in your everyday?
Right.
Can I give specific examples?
Sure.
So when we first started dating, I kind of talked about like the life that I wanted in relation to money and how, I wanted to set myself up for safety and live a comfortable life and not really have to worry about money, which I have put a lot of those things into place. And then I also talked about at the beginning of the year, I did my 2023 financial year in review and just kind of shared with him like the increases I made as a relative percentage from the beginning of the year. And during those conversations, he was just like, oh yeah, I want to do that. I need to do that. And I did see like on accident, he only had under 10K in his 401k. We're in our 30s. And I don't know, is that fair for me to see that as a red flag? And
I think that's unfair.
Is that something we could have worked through? I don't know.
You said you think it's unfair?
I think that's unfair.
Well, I first want to say congrats, like that you
there.
are taking those steps and that you do a year in review. Like that just made me very happy. But now go ahead with how you think that's unfair.
So they're in their 30s, and she thinks it's a red flag that he has less than $10,000 in his 401k, right? But there's a lot of people who have nothing in their 401k. And when I say a lot, majority.
Right.
Majority of the daters out there, especially under 35, have nothing in a retirement account, mainly because they can't afford to put stuff in a retirement account.
Right.
Right. They might not be able to afford it. They might also not come from a family who taught them to retire. Right. So much of what I think is money is like what someone teaches you.
Yeah.
Right. And
so when is it fair to give grace then in that instance? Because he wasn't great with money. We talked about it. He didn't really have a savings. He just kind of spent his paycheck. So where's that grace line?
Why does there have to be a grace line is what my question is. Why can't we talk about like, okay, if you and I, you're the expert here, but this is the way I see it. Like, and maybe I'm putting in my personal stuff too, where like, I remember my husband, he had like maybe like a small retirement account, but he was living paycheck to paycheck when I met him because he was a lowly paid academic. What's he going to do here? Right. But then when we started building our life, it was very different, right? We were saying, okay, here's our goals. What can we do to make those goals? He had his own goals. I had my goals. We shared them. Some of those goals became our team goals. And then it's like, okay, what are we going to do to get to those goals? And that does require a team way of thinking, not, well, I did this and you've done this. And it's like this, you're not separate islands in a long-term relationship. At some point, things are merging, literally or figuratively, but they're merging. And you have to think of what's best for the team.
Right. I think it depends why it's happening. Like you mentioned, someone is not they're having a certain level of paycheck. Maybe they have loans they're paying off. They have other goals. And then I think in the follow-up, how you were explaining it was kind of like not making, it sounds like just spending away the paycheck versus like this is just a circumstance of earning less, or maybe they didn't have access or they didn't understand. But I do think what's behind it or why it's not happening is really valuable information. Like, is it because there's a lack of information? Is there because there's a lack of motivation? Is there because like this was the next thing on the list, we didn't just get to it? Because I do think that it's hard to know exactly where that line is, but that can be super stressful in a long-term relationship if you're, this is really important to you and you're seeing it as not important to them. And then but there will typically be a little bit of that in a relationship because there's that saver and spender. And so I imagine that you would be the saver in a lot of relationships, which is great.
But you never know that. He might be the saver. Like, we don't have enough context here, right? So, like, and I think for anyone listening to this question, I think it's also like, I don't think there's like a line of grace. I think seeing their behavior with time and money can teach you a lot. And then you have to determine if that's the lifestyle you want. Does that make sense?
Because it comes with a lot of things.
Right.
Someone who's more impulsive with money is probably also more impulsive with their calendar
and their emotions.
So like, are you up for like the random vacay? Are you?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I used to have a friend whose spouse made, I remember her telling me this, $14 million a year. But sometimes he would go into a manic episode and 3 Ferraris out the dealership in 1 month. And I was just like, I can't live in a life like that's great that he's making that much money, but this seems really stressful for me. It's like really hard to understand like what's happening. So yeah, and this guy might have all of his 401ks maxed out. But, are you able to deal with the emotional windfall that comes with this specific person who's able to have this kind of career? Like, there's all these other extra conversations.
Right. It's less about the exact number and more about what's behind them.
Right.
And what's happening behind the scenes.
This is a great question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I liked how you say you kind of have to look at it holistically. If their behaviors with money are mirrored in other parts of their decision making, then that's kind of gives you insight.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Let's go to our next question. Thanks for calling the Ask a Matchmaker hotline. How can we help you?
Hi. So my question is, my partner and I have been dating for about 1.5 years now, and I make about 3 times more than he does. And I've been saving since I was 16 years old, and financial stability is just like super, super important to me. My partner and I, we've talked a lot about money and our future goals, and we're totally aligned on the life that we want, which is great. But as we kind of dug more into like the financial details of like what we both have in savings and for retirement, it came to light that he doesn't really have that much saved up, and I kind of freaked out. We want a family, and you both mentioned that it's really expensive to raise kids, like camps and birthday parties and all that. And I fear that I have like this constant burden of having to be like the sole breadwinner for our family. And I guess and the lack of savings gives me a lot of anxiety as well. So I'm not really sure how to move forward. And I just love your perspective on whether are we doomed? Is there a way to get over this hurdle, or how would you kind of best approach this situation?
It sounds like you're handling the prep and thinking through and just making money moves starting from when you're 16 is that's far beyond what most people do. It's very advanced. And I'd say 99% of the people in my community, like in the Fiscal Femme community or that I talk to, most have no idea how they're going to pay for this before it happens. It's like everyone is figuring it out as they go. It is a lot of times we don't even know what the expense is until it happens. So I would say you're far and beyond prepared than the average person, definitely not doomed. And if it makes you feel better, I think a lot of times we can think about like budgeting or making a plan as something that's restrictive or kind of this burden. But for most people, I find that it actually is very liberating and gives us peace of mind. And so it could be something that you map out as best you can, like what your life might look like with a family, and how would those expenses look, and how would you break that down as far as your income versus your partner, and what you would want in savings for different goals to see maybe you are closer than you think. And then even if things aren't exactly the same, maybe there are less, maybe there are more, that you can adjust as you go. But that could give you a picture of, okay, here are our top 3 goals. Here's where we stand as far as how much we want to be contributing to those goals and how much we have saved for those goals. But I would say you are not alone in that. Most people are like, how will I do this?
I have some follow-up questions. Do you feel like you're emotionally compatible to this person?
I think so. Yeah, I definitely do. We're compatible in almost every way. He's extremely supportive.
What makes you think you're not financially compatible then? Well, let me give you all my questions, okay? Because I think that's really I'm going to point out a picture, and some of it's rhetorical, okay? You're telling me that you are compatible in almost every way. And emotional compatibility, that's the big one. Because that means you can have those conversations. So now what we're really talking about is hegemony, which is essentially we've been socialized to think that men should make more than us. But we can see right now, currently, there are more women enrolled in college than men. And that we need to, there are some, and by the way, just because someone makes a certain amount of money doesn't mean that they have no work ethic or ambition. There are certain jobs that just pay less, right? If her boyfriend is a school teacher, great job to have, hard job.
Really important job.
But also has a salary cap. That doesn't make him any less ambitious, any less hardworking. Like, I'm trying to keep the dignity in the jobs. She happens to make 3 times more than him, right? And so what I'm saying is, let's say he wasn't your partner anymore. Do you think that the next person that you meet is going to make as much as you do, maybe has saved up more, but will also be compatible with you in every way? And then the second question I want to ask you is, have you talked about what you would do when you are married? Like, are we combining finances? Because if you are, then you can kind of think of his salary as like a new bonus. You know, that's fun. Then, you know, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, I'm going to say this, and Ashley, you can share as much as you want, but like, I'll tell you that, like, I remember that my husband didn't have any savings when I met him. None. But I knew every other way. Like, I knew what his plans were. I knew that, okay, if he leaves academia, he'll make this, and then we'll start. We do have different savings accounts for our goals, because I didn't want all the money in one place. I wanted to visually see, this is our housing savings, and this is our emergency savings, and this is our vacation savings. So like, we have them in different pots, and we play around, and things have priority. But that's what I'm saying is, like, learning to live with a budget, that you're in this together, because this is a team effort. If you are coming together, living together, having children, I would never advise any of my clients to like Venmo their spouse for their share of the diapers.
It's a lot of Venmoing.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
If you think I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong.
No. No, I think it's very fair. You're basically saying you have to take into account someone's earnings to equate it to how much they've saved. You can't judge their savings,
right,
if they haven't been earning as much as you.
Right.
Yeah. And that they could have a very important job they love and be equally compatible with you.
I remember one of my guy friends, he works in fintech. I don't know if he listens to this podcast, but if he does, hi. And he told me how much he makes, but I also know how many hours a week he works.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so if you had kids, who's doing this? He's like, well, let's probably get an au pair to help her out. I was like, oh, okay.
Right.
Like, I know he doesn't cook. He doesn't have time to do that. Like, he's working 70, 80 hours a week. I'm like, wow, I couldn't. But he's getting paid more than me because he can.
Right. No, my first job out of school was an investment banking job. And I didn't even have like a pet or kids or plants, anything. But it still just was really hard for me to not see my friends, to like work that late.
But that's why they're paying you the big money, so that you don't have a social life.
But I traded after 2 years. I left, and that's really why I started the business, because I had to figure out how to live in New York with a pay cut. And I was like, I don't know how to do any of this. So
does this give you any like courage?
It does. My partner and I are really emotionally compatible. I've dated men who have been super rich, tons of savings, and they've all been really toxic. And I think that's why it's really important to me to figure out how to, I guess, like get past this anxiety that I have because he is really wonderful. And so I'm trying to navigate like how exactly we do that with like the power dynamics of me earning, a lot more than he does with like the lack of saving. So it's kind of like a pendulum that I keep like going back and forth on.
Right.
Yeah.
Have more conversations. Talk about your future. Talk about what we need to learn and what we need to unlearn. Use a financial advisor. What else?
I do think too is when there is a big difference in income, how you set up the structures of the finances matter. Like
Yeah.
if they are in a position, if let's say your lifestyle is beyond what their income is, it's kind of like
Yeah.
if someone's not working, that if they're always feeling like they're having to ask for money
That's
in a relationship to spend, like that does not feel good. You don't feel like an equal partner. So I would just have that in mind. And it sounds like you said you're so emotionally compatible. So having conversation about how you're feeling as you're combining, and if you're feeling that resentment, like you're working and you're contributing more, or if they're feeling like that an imbalance in power, just to be in touch about that and know that conversations plus like how you set up your money systems can be
right.
helpful. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you for the question. Let's go to
Thank you.
our last question. Thank you for calling the Ask a Matchmaker hotline. How can we help you?
Hi. So I'm 31 years old. I own my own car, and my condo, but I have some consumer debt. Nothing insurmountable, but I struggle with cash flow, savings, and money mindset. I'm actively working on it through books and therapy, but I'm really insecure about it. I feel like someone will judge me for it, so I don't date at all. Am I right in not dating, or am I being too in my head and tying too much of my self-worth to it?
So I would say the latter for sure. Like you're yeah.
You're being really hard on
Yeah,
yourself.
so hard on yourself. Your net worth has nothing to do with your self-worth. And you probably with your car and your home already have like significant net worth. So I would say that definitely you can be dating and you
She
should
owns
be
a home?
dating. She owns her home and
The
her
fuck?
car.
Are you kidding me? You own more? Like, I don't even
Well,
own
I
a
mean,
home.
like I have a mortgage. I'm paying the mortgage, but
Yes.
I bought it.
Yes, I think
Girl,
that's incredible.
you're already winning.
Yeah.
And you're in your early 30s?
Yeah.
Okay. Read those books.
Get dating. The 30-day money cleanse, I have to say that my first book is all about budgeting and money mindset. And I would love for you to read it and tell me if it helps and how it goes. But it sounds like you're in a much better position than you think. Definitely can be dating. And the fact that you're even acknowledging the things that you want to change and putting in the work through therapy and books, I think is incredible.
Yeah. Buy her book, 30-Day Money Cleanse. Let's
Yeah.
figure this out.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
I mean-
everything. Co-signed.
Okay. I mean,
Pun intended.
like I grew up decent. Like I grew up quite privileged, and so I have this like mindset in terms of how I want to live. And right now, I'm kind of struggling with attaining that because I want, you want to be on your own 2 feet and you want to do your own thing. And I'm so scared that somebody's just going to judge me for it, that I'm not there yet, or I don't know. I guess that's
Do
where my
you
head's
judge
at.
people for not being there yet? Because sometimes this is projection.
No, I don't. Like I try really hard to be like, no, and I watch my parents, and they grew up with nothing, that whole kind of thing, and I don't judge because I know it's more of, sorry, I'm a little all over the place. It's more of I'm not there yet, so I know that I can't expect somebody else to be there yet. But then I kind of get in my head about it. So like I get on apps and I spiral and I'm like, okay, no, I can't do this.
I think the 30-Day Money Cleanse. Is
Yeah,
gonna
and I
help
think
her.
taking
Just
it a
change
step
the
at a time.
mindset
Yeah.
away from that.
Definitely. And I think too, it sounds like you are not judging and you have a lot of compassion, and that hopefully that if anybody you're dating that gets far enough where you're having this conversation, that they would too.
It's a really great question, by the way, and I really appreciate you calling in to say it.
Thank you. I wasn't sure. I mean, especially because there's some debt there, and it's, I was listening to the other questions and bringing it up in terms of when to bring that up and how to bring that up. And so that, your answers really helped on that front as well. But Yeah,
how do
that's
you-
just
how
kind of
do
where
you-
I was at.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And like I think about for instance, I have student loan debt. But I pay my student loans the day that I get paid. So I get paid on the 15th of every month.
Mm-hmm.
That's also the day that my student loans get paid. So I've never missed it. It's just
Not
out.
there.
It's just not there. It's never existed. And I've been paying them before by my husband. So my husband knows we know each other's income outside of the debt.
I see. Like it's your after loans income.
Yeah.
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 That's what.
And I think that's how I approached it. I remember telling him, like, I have a lot of student loan debt.
Yeah.
You know, they were just giving away loans back then.
Yeah.
No conversations.
Like candy, T-shirts, and
Yeah,
loans.
yeah. But it comes out of my paycheck, and I've never missed a payment. The end. Like, what else? You know, it's not your response. It's coming out of my paycheck.
Right.
And that was the end of that conversation. I feel like, you know.
Yeah.
I think when you talk about debt, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong here, but I think when you talk about the debt that you have, I think people are more interested in how you're handling it than what the number is.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because you could owe
makes
$1,000, but if you're missing the payments,
Right.
well, okay. But you can owe $10,000, but if you're making each payment, you know, and you're still able to live your life, then okay, we can work around that.
And I think it's like having debt. If you just, it might make you feel better to just Google the stats, like the average credit card debt per household, the average student loans. Like most people have it. So, you're definitely like not alone or not the only one who's paying it down.
Yeah. Thank you again for your question.
Thank you.
Ashley, it is wonderful having you on here. We're going to have you back on here for more financial questions, I think.
I would love
so
it.
Maybe in a few weeks we'll do this again. But I wanted to ask you, where can people find you if they want to work with you, learn more about what you do, and of course buy your books?
Yes. So they can find me on all the socials at the Fiscal Femme, and my website's thefiscalfemme.com.
And we're going to include all those links in the show notes for you. If you're watching this on YouTube, show notes right below. Why don't you comment? Tell us. Give us more questions. We'll answer them on the next episode. And then also, if you're on Apple or Spotify, show notes has links there too. Has also links to this show. And if you want to work with Ashley, all those links are going to be in the show notes. If you're on YouTube, while you're looking at the show notes, write a comment. Help me with the algorithm gods. Same thing with Spotify and Apple. While you're there, look at the show notes. Look at all the links, because there's also links on how to work with the Agape team if you're single. And if you're interested in working with Ashley, all of her links and a link to her book are going to be there. Ashley, thank you again for being here on the Ask a Matchmaker podcast.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, dear listener or viewer. Be lovable, but more importantly, be likable. See you next week.